What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Indie Inkwell. I am one of your two co-hosts, JJ. This week, Michael's not going to be with us. He's got work completely taking up all of his time right now. So we will hope he comes back here very soon. But I do have two guests with us today. First off is a guest you might recognize from a recent episode. And her husband was just on the show on the last episode, and that's going to be Lauren Sparks. And we also have Kat, is it Klockow?
It's Klockow.
Klockow. Okay, sorry. I probably should have asked that before we started. I apologize.
You could just call me Kat. I know it's a tricky name.
But anyway, founder of Corpse Flower Press, editor for Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities. How you guys doing?
You're doing well. Thank you for inviting us on the show.
Absolutely. Lauren doing her best Vanna White impression over here.
Yeah.
But no, not a problem. Lauren asked if she could bring you on the show. We were already going to have her on. I was like, of course, more the merrier. I mean, why not get more stuff out there? That's my whole goal with this show is so thank you guys for coming on the show, because if nobody comes on to talk to us, I don't have a show. So
well, it would be just you speaking, but
which is nowhere near as interesting as me actually interacting with somebody.
That is true.
But you could go through your long boxes or something.
There we go.
Right, but I've already done that like so many times on my channels.
Yeah.
But I do like to start every episode with everybody's kind of origin story, how they got into comic books as like either a kid or later on as an adult, and what kind of got them into the industry at first. So Lauren, I know this is probably like the third or fourth time I've had you do this, but if you would like to start and tell people your origin story, you've got actually a little bit extra time. You go into more detail this time because there's not 5 people on the episode today.
That is true.
Well, it's only the second time on the podcast.
Yes, but we did the panel as well where everybody did their origin stories. So that was live in front of people. We were supposed to have that recorded, but my camera just completely decided to not record it. So,
Camera said no.
Yeah.
Camera said big time no. I think we got about 5 minutes of the introduction of the episode of the panel, and then it cut off for no reason. So
it was a ghost. I'm just
going
to say ghost.
I wouldn't doubt it, honestly.
I think that's your answer for a lot of things.
I like to blame ghosts a lot for things. And where was GalaxyCon? Was it downtown Columbus?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's where the penitentiary used to be, and it caught on fire in 1933 and killed a few hundred people. So you could totally
Columbus
blame
is a lot more haunted than people give it credit for.
It smells burny down there. Anyway, Lauren, go. Origin story.
So I started reading comics. I don't even remember how early. I started reading newspaper comics, just pull out the comic section. I really got into manga in high school. And then I went to college for animation and learned a lot more about indie comics in my time there. I got a minor in sequential art as well. Probably one big turning point for me was when I used to work at Kings Island, which almost every early 20s something in Cincinnati works at Kings Island at some point. One of my coworkers lent me a copy of Blankets by Craig Thompson. And I was just like, oh, love is like, okay, here's the interesting comics that are like, they're just exploring whatever story you want, like manga does, but it's in America. People in America are doing that too. Clearly, of course they were. I just didn't have.
Well, because I mean, if you're not diving into that world head first, you don't realize it's not just superheroes. Like if you're just way on the outside of it, that's all you see.
Yeah, and I think that's why manga took off so much in like the late 90s, early 2000s, is because comics in America was superheroes for a really long time. The last 15, 20 years have improved things a lot in terms of
vastly
the type of stories available. I love it.
Yeah. So that's
is that the end of your origins?
There's no Matt meeting. There's no meet cute between the two of you and going on and the projects you're working on and all that.
What with me and Matt? Sorry, with me and Matt. I'm sorry.
You just stopped. Your origin story just like ceased.
Okay.
You went to SCAD.
By
You
the end of
Matt.
Scout, I realized I don't have exactly the right kind of brain to be a good animator. So I've been doing comics since I graduated in 2011, but working full time as a graphic designer because bills. So it's slow going, but I've worked on a bunch of stuff in the last 15 years.
I was gonna say that's where you ended up meeting Matt too. Was over at art
That's
school, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was okay, it's so funny because when we first met each other and he told me, "Oh, I'm in the sequential art program and I like cosplaying as Spider-Man and Spider-Man's my favorite character and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera." I'm like, "Oh, it's an American comic book nerd." I was like, "Oh, I found one."
Can
Yeah.
we just like pause for a second and admire the bravery of him to just come out and say that when he's first meeting you? Like,
Well, we were at like a comics SCAD department comics
still,
meetup.
as a guy, that's like not always the easiest thing for us to do right away.
It takes cojones to just say, "I cosplay as Spider-Man."
Right.
The
Like,
guy that wears the
The second
tightest
time I
outfit.
ever saw him at it, like the second meetup, I saw him again. He was dressed as Spider-Man the second time. He's an excellent Spider-Man.
I'm
oh,
Absolutely.
never
there you
looking
go.
at Matt the same
Can
way
he do the
again.
flippies?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
then he's approved.
he hasn't done them as much recently, but
Well, we're all getting older, so.
Just the image of Matt in a Spider-Man outfit doing flips down the GalaxyCon hallway is just that's an image.
Well, and for me, the only thing I've ever seen him wear is the MTS logo shirts, so I can't really picture him in anything but that.
Yeah, that is true.
he's usually Spider-Man at Free Comic Book Day at Comics to Games in Florence, Kentucky.
Oh, see, well, if your kid wants to get a picture of Spider-Man, head over there.
And they do.
That's awesome, though. So, Kat, move it over to you. Where did you kind of find your love for comic books as a kid or later on?
Oh man. So I really started reading comic books like every other creator when you're a kid. You see the syndicated comics and I would just dive into Calvin and Hobbes by Bill Watterson and
Mm.
just study just how he watercolored every ink stroke, just how the creation of the sequential comics in each panel went together. I remember doing this when I was in elementary school. So I've always been a fan of sequential art. I came about the industry in a different way than most cartoonists do. I actually did not go to art school. I have a major in Japanese linguistics and culture studies and studied to be
Ah,
an interpreter for the United Nations and other government
wow.
entities. So when that went bust in 2010, I went and fell back onto my hobby, which was cartooning. And that's what I did as just a way to relieve stress, essentially, through school. I would cartoon and then also the stress of trying to find a job. I'm sitting there cartooning away and started selling at conventions and building up just my portfolio, essentially, of comic books. Because of all the interpretation and translation courses that I've had, it was an easy entry into becoming a comic book editor. And then I eventually established Corpse Flower Press in 2020, along with Christina Wald and Tim Fuller. And we started publishing the Cabinet of Curiosities comics anthology. So I went from being a cartoonist to an editor to now owning a publishing company. Thank you, Lauren.
I was just say we were talking about it before you came on. I was trying to find mine earlier, and I recently rearranged my entire collection, and I cannot find my volume 1 anywhere. It's like stacked somewhere on the shelf.
It's there.
It's
I'm
there
sure.
somewhere.
Yeah, I have my copies right here. Ta-da! I also have, Lauren, the pinup that you did of the Pope-like monster
Oh, let's blow
with
that
the
up real quick.
glorious foot that I remember. I watched the live stream of all of you, of everyone. I almost said all y'all.
Hey, talk how you talk.
All y'all, and from GalaxyCon, and remarking on the foot because Jay or Lauren, you put this up on the screen, and when Lauren did the thumbnail for this and that foot was in that thumbnail, I'm like, I love that. I don't usually do feet, but it's so eye-catching and unique perspective of just a happy Poplik monster. No one's been slaughtered recently, I guess, but he's still happy sitting
Or
on.
maybe someone was slaughtered recently and he's
That's true.
happy
We
about
only
it.
have so much of a viewpoint. Maybe we are the victim looking up at the Poplik
As
monster
we're falling from the
as we're
bridge.
falling to our death into the ravine below.
See, that's the
But
fun part of stuff like that, though,
yeah,
is it can be left up to your interpretation for a lot of it.
yes. And when editing the cabinet and guiding the creators on how to illustrate, because as I preference when I do haunted history lectures, this is like an episode of Murder, She Wrote. Somebody has to die to have a ghost, which means we're going to get a little morbid. And we try to keep that same kind of light morbidity over all these pages because somebody's died. There's something tragic that has happened that create the ghost story or the urban legend, and it needs to be shown, but let's make it in a way that doesn't traumatize someone when they open up the book.
Right, you can paint a picture for
Accessible
somebody
death.
without painting a nightmare for somebody.
Exactly. Yes, that is exactly right. So I also am a big fan of manga. You'll see this is a issue of One Piece. It's a page that I got when I went to Shonen Jump Shop. So One Piece is my favorite manga. You'll see it all over my studio here. There's little pieces of Luffy. Okay, that sounded also very morbid.
Pieces of Luffy.
Ooh, pieces of Luffy all over the place. There's an arm over here. There's a leg over there. His head is on my shelf.
On a spike.
No, not a spike. Why would I do that?
You've written a lot of like history stuff too.
Yes.
I was
Yeah.
just about to say we've got basically two like spooky historians on the show
Mhm.
today.
Yeah. Before I started doing the Cabinet of Curiosities, I wrote a haunted history book called Ohio's Haunted Crimes, which is why I could just go, oh, the state penitentiary is where the conference center and all these hotels are in the hockey arena in Columbus, Ohio, because I wrote an entire chapter about that. So that's actually what brought about the cabinet was because I would go to our drink and draws in Cincinnati while I was doing the field work for that book and just tell like Jay Callaghan, who was on the show a few
He's been
episodes
on the
ago.
show many
Yeah, many
times.
times. Or Tim or our friend Kevin. And I'd just be saying, well, this is the place I went to. These are the people I interviewed, and these are the ghost stories they had. And that eventually was like, hey, we should really make an anthology series of all of us that are part of this group, Lauren and Matt in this fold, going, we should really do something. And then COVID hit and none of us could leave our house. So over Zoom, we're
Perfect
like,
chance to
we're
do
going
something.
to do something. So that's how the first book was made is we just all were shut up in our house and had to do something for our sanity. So we did ghost stories.
No, that's great. So, how did you guys actually like end up linking up? Did you guys just meet at like a drink and draw event, or?
I think I met Matt first and then you, Lauren, through Drink and Draw and also CXC. And I met Tim and Jay over a decade ago at Space when it was still in the haunted Ramada Inn. And it really wasn't haunted, it was just falling apart. So it
Yeah, it was
gave
just
that
really, really old.
like the zombie apocalypse is about to happen right here in Columbus at this hotel. And we were just it was kind of battle scars essentially. We're like, is your part of the basement really moldy and yet cold? And it's like, yes, and hot. How? Like, so we were just
Columbus.
basically at this Columbus, but global warming. What? Yeah, and we just started talking and then realized we all lived in the Cincinnati region. And then they invited me to the Drink and Draw, which at the time was super small and super indie. And that's where I eventually met, like I said, Matt and Lauren. I think that's how it went, Lauren. is my memory faulty?
I don't actually remember. It's like, you know how you kind of like when people are just nearby, you're just like, oh, that person, I've always known them because they're here. We're all here together. How did I meet you? I don't know. I still don't remember how. I think I might have first met Jay at some sort of Cincinnati comics convention. I don't remember.
Jay,
Jay
the
is
only
Always
reason
eternal.
I
knew
can
each other
remember exactly
forever.
how I met Jay is because he is the first comic book creator that I ever had the guts to walk up to in person at a convention and ask to interview them on camera at the convention.
Oh,
So, and he was like, "Yeah, for sure."
he's a
Like,
great
and ever
one.
since we've just been working back and forth.
Yeah, he's a great one to go and
Yeah,
be
he
your
had he was the
first.
only one that
Sorry,
didn't look like he was either miserable or like tired of being there at the time. So
oh,
I was like, he looks like he's nice.
yeah, and he is. He's very nice.
Oh, for sure.
Jay,
Yeah.
excellent.
Mm-hmm.
He's actually the one who contacted Lauren and Matt and Jack for me for the panel down at GalaxyCon last December.
Yeah.
So yeah, shout out Jay Callaghan. He makes so much stuff happen behind the scenes.
Everyone go read Mest.
For sure. I do know where
Go
that's
read it.
at. That's over there on the shelf.
Yeah.
I don't know where my copy is. Oh, I bet I do know where. It's like 2 rooms away.
I was just say we all buy so much indie stuff. It's really hard to keep track of it all. Like,
Yeah.
especially the stuff you buy in a hurry at a convention because you're like on your way out and you see something, you're like, "Ooh, I want to check that out though." Like you just snatch a copy and go. Like
Yes.
I actually, over the last several months, I've been organizing all my zines and mini comics and indie comics just by size because that's convenient.
That is
Like, all
convenient.
the ones that are the 8th page are in a box that fits that, and then like the quarter page ones and the half page.
I would say that's another reason why it's sometimes hard to keep track of stuff is because indie creators, everybody will make stuff different sizes.
Mhm.
Like-
Yeah. I actually organize mine by where I picked it up. So it's like, did I get this at
Oh, that's
CXC or did I get
smart.
this at SPX? And I just have them in little
I got to
groups on my
rearrange my whole
bookshelf.
collection now.
Yeah. It's
I started a couple of years ago just in pencil writing when and where I got a thing. Like
Yeah,
I
that
got
makes
this
sense, too.
space in 2023 or
Yeah.
whatever. Because I have, but that's like with all the things that I've gotten over the last 10 years, most of them are not marked though. So I'm like, was this from someone else? I don't know. I don't remember.
Right. Yeah. Oh.
So, how did you go about forming Corpse Flower Press? Because I know there's a lot of people out there that have dreams of having their own publishing company or what have you. And I don't think they realize how much work goes into that side of things.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Um so we decided that we were going to put the anthology together, and the first book we actually published through Christina's LLC, and then I eventually have bought the title for it. But there's some industry stuff behind. Woo. So basically what we did is for the Kickstarters, we wanted to make sure that um trying to keep it as organized as it is, you want it to all go to one place. And the entire missions of Corpse Flower Press is to support new creators who are getting into the industry. So we're an entry level publishing house, being students that are just graduating out of art school, people who are pro-am becoming professional cartoonists. This is a place where you can do artwork at a competitive page rate. And then when you go further into other companies, you can say, I am working already professionally for this amount of money. Now I demand this higher amount of money.
It gives you a
And
little bit of leverage
it's
when you try to go get those bigger jobs.
exactly. And that's really why we created not just the anthology, but Corpse Flower Press. And I hope to continue doing it, even though this is our right now the current anthology that comes out at the end of February. It was a lot of tricks. Signing up and doing the LLC took a very long time, And
Yeah, that's
also
not a
you wear a
quick
lot of hats.
process.
Sorry?
I said that's not a quick process at
It
all.
is not a quick process, and it's done really to protect the creators because it's like, although Corpse Flower Press, I am uh, the guarantor of it on all the different uh,
Tax
government,
form.
yeah, forms. It is its own entity separate from me. So it's we still have Tim Fuller, who's our art director, who has input, and I still talk about, and to Jay, who works with our as our publishing director or PR director. Um, it's still a group, and we work together to make sure that our books get made. So I'm happy to say we did 2 other books last year. So we're actually a legit publisher that doesn't just do Cabinet of Curiosities. We do Zombio, a space adventure, which is a kids comic, and then I did Frogman Funnies, which I did not write or illustrate this. I was just the publisher, and this was very exciting because I could say I really do bring up all these characters, creators, and am able to publish their work and basically just be the way people can get into the industry. I try not to be scary or overwhelming. So if I get scary or overwhelming, let me know. Because it's a big industry. It's a tricky industry. It feels like it's built on sand, and that sand is constantly shifting, as we are
Mhm.
just seeing with the news this week about some of our biggest publishers had to lay off dozens of people. That's just super scary.
Well, and
And
then the distributors that are going
the
bankrupt,
distributors,
and I
yeah,
mean, the publishers are leaving like crazy, going to
yes,
different other distribution and companies. It's a madhouse right now.
yeah, and it is simultaneously the worst time to become a publisher and the best time to become a publisher because it's easy. I won't say it's easy. It's a lot of paperwork. Be prepared for paperwork and constant taxes. That's what owning a company is: paperwork and constant taxes. There, and especially if you go to lots of different conventions, you have different transient vendors licenses that you have to apply for and pay for. And I am going to bore everyone. I am so sorry. Your
No,
listeners are
not
No,
just
the
this
eating.
is really, really good information because there's a lot of beginning creators that watch and listen to us. So this
Oh,
is
yes.
awesome information.
Yeah, it's wow. So I actually do go into art schools and lecture about the business of making comics. So yeah, Lord. And I hear this a lot from other people that are our age or younger that have gone to art school. These are business courses that they never got. And it is
Mhm.
incredibly important to know, even if you are a self proprietor or you're just in just for yourself, you need to know how to file taxes. You need to know which forms to file. You need to know when. You need to know what the different levels of business corporations protect you from different things. There's business insurance that you can purchase if you have large displays. So if you have somebody who accidentally spills their coffee all over your table and
Mhm.
ruin a bunch of your risiographs, yeah, you can take that to your insurance and say, I need to be refunded for X amount of money. Or if somebody accidentally takes out your um, button collection or keychains or whatever at a convention, you have a way to secure yourself from that. Those are scary nightmares for
So
all of
that's
us
stuff
other
that I
indie
never even
creators.
really thought about, but I've always like subconsciously tried to keep any drink I had away from people's tables. Like,
Hmm. Yeah,
thank
it's
you. Thank you.
yeah.
well, because
Yes,
I wouldn't
thank
want my stuff getting all messed up. Like,
yeah. No. It's there's also a shrink, which is theft. That also can happen as well. But that's a different topic. But
yeah, that's a whole episode in of
that is a whole
itself.
episode. But it happens at large conventions. You have to learn how to kind of people watch, basically.
Mhm.
Not that I think everyone is out to steal my comics, but it's just
No,
like,
but you gotta
hey,
keep your head on a swivel. I mean, it may not be your comics, it might be,
mhm.
all the stuff under your table. Like,
I have a small story about that. At Rhode Island Comic Con a number of years ago, the artist next to me had their money box stolen.
um,
And that was fun doing, because I say fun in a sarcastic way, by the
Mhm.
way. It was not fun. It was terrible and stressful because we had to call the police, file an incident report, calming them down so that they can actually answer in a coherent manner to the police officer to file the report, because it was a few $1,000s that just got swiped out of the artist alley.
And it's not like
And
you can just go to the bank and pull out another couple grand as a creator, like,
exactly. That could
this is
be
not a millionaire's game, like
no. And that is something I want to stress. I don't make zillions of dollars being a publisher. I love seeing everyone's creations being able to be spread about the world, and that's where I find my joy. I am lucky that I am in the black, but there's months where I'm not. And that's just the reality of business. And I try to make business choices that keep all of us afloat. Like, I'm able to say for this third issue of the Cabinet of Curiosities, we did well enough that I didn't need to kickstart the funds. We had them to be able to pay everyone and do a print run. So
That's
yay.
amazing. That's really hard to do.
It
Yes.
is. And boy howdy, have I been stressed about it for 3 months straight, or 3 months, 3 years, 3 years straight. Yes, there is the Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities 1, 2, and 3, which comes out February 28th, which I'm happy to say we have an official launch party. This is the first time we've been able to do a launch party for any of the books, because the first two basically came out during COVID lockdowns.
And nobody was
And
allowed anywhere near each other.
yeah, we weren't allowed, like, yeah, 6 foot. Yeah, what kind of party is that when we're all like 6 to 9 feet apart? We're like, hey, that's a really cool book you worked on.
Right, air cheers. Like
Yeah, woo, fist bumps, through the air, like the 80s. We could green screen ourselves together. Uh, so I'm happy to say we're doing it at a small press bookshop that's in Dayton, Kentucky. I almost said Dayton, Ohio. No, Dayton, Kentucky.
That's
So
different.
yeah, that's slightly different. It
I can
take you
imagine.
wildly different places. So,
Dayton, Ohio is a very special place.
it is. They say there's UFOs there at the Air Force Base. So
Oh, they say there's all kinds of things there,
there is.
but
There's a witch's tower there, which is fun and
that
haunted.
is there.
There's just north of it was the old lunatic asylum in Lima or Lima. Depends on who you
However
ask.
you want to pronounce it.
Yeah.
Depends on what part of the state you're from.
Yeah. And yeah. So yeah, I could go into business all day, and I'm sure no one wants to actually hear that.
Well, our viewers have gone up since you started.
Oh,
so,
what?
I mean-
So everyone get a website. Get a website, join Substack, get your mailing list. Lauren, why are you don't have a website, do you yet? Lauren, do we need to make you a website live on the show?
No.
I was gonna say my day job is web development, just FYI.
There you go.
I have a domain. I just haven't. But
We'll talk.
like, okay, after I finish this book.
Yeah, I have a website not only for the Cabinet of Curiosities itself, but also Corpse Flower Press. And then I have my own. And then I have my old website mirrored onto my current website. And
That's
I
something not enough people actually do.
oh my gosh, yeah, it makes it so much easier when you need to update all the HTML and all the script and everything. It's yeah.
That's what I can't. The HTML. I
It
can't.
does get
Yeah, I was saying, I
you
think we might be losing people at that point.
all right. Getting back to comics and ghosts and
Yes.
horror.
So
comedy
give
And,
me
and-
the
release
so the
party.
origin of the Cabinet of Curiosities was you guys were all basically bored during COVID.
yes.
So what made you settle on ghost stories? I mean, I can tell obviously you have a horror obsession slightly.
It's like all I do. I'm a one trick pony of just ghosts and dead things.
Fun.
It's fun.
It is fun.
Like it's so when I'm outside the Cabinet of Curiosities, I do horror comics, and it's not a long stretch. Ghost stories always fascinated me. I've been actually a live radio host before. I was a radio host for the Paranormal View, and now I do my own podcast with that Lauren was just on with my friends Jen and Christina. And Christina Wald helped establish the Cabinet of Curiosities. Jen is the writer of the Lady in Black story that is right behind Lauren. And there we go. That's a gorgeous page.
Hang on,
Gorgeous.
let's blow that up real quick. Lauren, hold
Oh.
that back up.
This is the title page. Hooray, car chase!
Oh, got to start it with a good car chase.
Oh yeah, with your Model Ts.
Of course.
Yeah,
1920s cars.
yeah, 1927.
They're the coolest.
Yeah, they are. So why ghost stories? Ghost stories are kind of evergreen. That's generally when I say I write ghost stories or work with ghost stories, people's ears immediately perk up. And just about everyone I talk to has a family ghost story or something strange that's happened to them. It could be something as mundane as a glass just moved on its own on their desk to full-bodied apparitions walking through their houses, or just family stories that have happened over the course of decades where the same family members have seen a shadow person walking through a family home. But you'll have witnesses that are grandparents, parents, and children. I used to be a paranormal investigator and brought a lot of that into kind of guiding these books and how people kind of read them, and I hope some authenticity, really. So it's like reading a version of Ghost Hunters, but more stuff happens quicker. Oh,
And there's more historical explanation.
there's a lot more historical explanations. I'm really proud to say that we had historical societies starting to contribute stories to the anthology. So that's how we got two different versions of the Crosswick Snake in issue 2.
Nice.
Because one was like, no one had heard of this cryptid before. And then we had two different teams who wanted to work on it. They took very different routes to explain the story of the Crosswick Snake, and they were just so great. We included both of them. So the Warren County Historical Society found a clipping from 1890, and maybe 1892, that a boy was allegedly kidnapped by a 40-foot long snake that had legs while he was fishing in the Crosswick Creek just outside of Cincinnati, just north of it. It is actually now where the location where this kid was essentially grabbed and taken into an old tree stump is where the Renaissance Festival is. So
Really?
yes, that is where this occurred. And so whenever our friends of mine go up to the Ren Fair, I'm like, please take photos of Crosswick Creek for me. I know it's not exciting. It's a tiny little creek, but this fantastic cryptid story happened here. So the family members, or the family members chased this giant snake with legs to a tree stump, and the snake went into the tree stump, dropped the kid. They tried to burn it out, and then it just ran down the creek. Exactly 2 years later, it was witnessed in Lebanon, Ohio, and then 2 years after that, Caesar Creek. And then after that, no one's really heard of it since then. And it is a
1890s
yeah,
sighting.
1890s sightings. The 1870s through about the 1910s, Cincinnati had so many strange things in the creeks and in the Ohio River swimming around. Like, you just put up one of the pages. This is the roving serpent. This was my contribution as a cartoonist to this most recent book. This is the original page. And basically, in 1878, it sparked a serpent frenzy in Cincinnati. There you go. There's the page. It wasn't the only serpent reported that year, let alone in that next 20 years. And people just kept seeing strange things, like the mermaids that Jay actually worked on for issue 1. That was also seen in 1896. So people are seeing strange things. This is an incomplete second page. This one got trashed, essentially. But this is the serpent in that was seen underneath the Roebling Bridge, which connects Cincinnati with northern Kentucky.
The model
That
for
is
the Brooklyn Bridge.
wild.
It is the model of the Brooklyn Bridge. So I actually use the Brooklyn Bridge a lot when trying to get different camera angles, because apparently in Cincinnati we like to take only two angles of the bridge, one from the Cincinnati side and one from the Kentucky side, and no interesting like under the bridge or over the bridge or anything like that. And so use that a lot.
Photographers, you have your mission.
Go try. Be on a barge. Take that photo. Use a drone. Take that photo.
Just
If it's
don't go
allowed.
swimming in that river.
No, don't swim in the river. You'll come out with an extra leg. Or you'll glow. And that's not the X-Men power you want.
Yeah, no.
Not at all.
No.
So yeah, not all the creators did their work physically with actual pages. Some of them did it digitally. Jay comes back again. He is the writer for a Grassman story. Our art director, Tim Fuller, is the illustrator of that one. We also have the Grassman being, there we go, Grassman meets industry. This is one of two pages, but it is the Ohio Grassman is Ohio's Bigfoot, except for Grassman is described to be about only 7 feet tall instead of the classic 9 feet as Sasquatch.
A little bit more manageable.
Yeah, a little bit more manageable. It has the name not because it's like dressed in grass or anything. It's known for making essentially large nests in the state forests in central Ohio, but it's been seen as far south as Cincinnati. That one, somebody reported that sighting to me. It was on the west side in a cemetery. I think it was St. Michael's. At any rate, it was described as having red hair, and this was at a paranormal convention that somebody was telling me. And I'm like, oh, that's just my uncle. You saw him. He's Bert, right?
We've been
So-
looking for him for a while
We've
now.
Yeah, he's been on the loose for a few years. Thank you for telling us where he is. It's in Cincinnati, of all places, on the west side, enjoying the chili.
Right.
Yeah, it's been fun. And then let's see, what other stories do we have? We have Brandon Wagner. He returns. He was an illustrator for the first issue. He did music hall horror in the first issue. I love his artwork. It is so approachable. And here we go. It's this one. So it kind of goes into the story of the Moselle first. The Moselle was a steamship that exploded in the Ohio River. And there we go. Sorry. And they buried the bodies underneath Cincinnati Music Hall, which is one of the ways Cincinnati Music Hall became so haunted in the first place. But he's back for another issue. He is doing Cincinnati's oldest cold case, which is the murder of Billy Fee from 1890. And Billy Fee, the actual true cold case is he was on a shanty boat going towards Lawrenceburg, Indiana, and he was shot and basically shoved into the river, and his body was found just across Lawrenceburg on the other bank on the Kentucky side. And no one knows how he died. They know who he was with, but he was suddenly dead. So Brandon takes that story and gives it a more eldritch horror reason why he is dead. And I loved it. It felt like something from Lovecraft, but without the troubling parts of Lovecraft. Yeah.
Yeah, I've noticed with a lot of the stories in the Cabinet of Curiosities that they're scary, but it's more like spooky than like actually scare you kind of material.
Oh,
you know
yeah.
what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's Goosebumps was definitely the star we guided ourselves with. We were just like, we want to. Our biggest purchaser of these books are middle grade readers and their families. And it's just
Which
a very
is when
good
we were all
entry
reading
point.
Goosebumps.
Yeah. And it's just such a good entry point into the local history of the area. It, as you said, is spooky. Some say would be spoopy work.
Oh, there
but
you go.
yeah. And it's campy. And that is the point. We are supposed to be campy.
Mhm.
Like, just like a horror host from the 1980s, we are campy and we own it. And that seems to have amassed a nice following of campy horror graphic novel lovers in Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky and Columbus.
I was gonna say, I think it's just like the whole tri-state area has so many ghost stories and like just weird stuff that happens. I mean, we've got a bunch of, serial unalivers that are from the area. Like there's a lot of weird stuff that comes out of this area of the country.
Oh, Ohio is delightfully strange.
We're not all just cornfields.
We're not all cornfields, and spooky things happen in those cornfields.
Oh yes, creatures flying over the top of the cornfields. That's always the fun ones to hear about.
Yeah, there are so many cryptids that are now getting slowly more internationally well known. I'm waiting for Grassman or the Loveland Frogman to enter Dondadon. If anyone reads that manga, that
Mm-mm.
it just uses international cryptids along with alien stories. And the Mongolian deathworm has been in. Sorry, spoilers here. It's been out for a couple of years, but the Mongolian deathworm is in it. Nessie is in it as just different entities in the story. And I'm just like, come on, Tatsu. You gotta do the Loveland Frogman. You gotta do the Loveland Frogman. I want to see it in some strange way because I have translated Gashapon for friends that have gotten cryptid little surprise Gashapon capsules from Japan. They're like, what does it say? And I'm like, exactly what you think it does. This is the Loveland Frogman. But it's well known now.
That just makes me picture they were expecting it to say something like profound.
Exactly.
Like, what's it say? What's it say?
Like there was
Exactly what you
absolutely
would assume it says.
this is the Loveland Frogman. Or yeah, exactly. Um, but yeah, it's been a lot of fun to work with everyone retelling the ghost stories. I love when we do each one of these books, I come up with a dossier essentially of every single one of the stories. This is a good question for Lauren in a minute, but I let all the creators pick which of these stories sounds the most interesting to write about. Which brings me to Lauren. How did you choose to do The Lady in Black?
Well, I didn't write the story because Jen Polar already had a short story written.
True. But
Based
what
on
drew you to it?
I'm trying to remember because it's been a couple of years now.
Okay. I did not mean to throw you under the bus with that. I'm sorry.
The fun of live broadcasting.
I think it was because it's based on something relatively well known in history. I kind of like history stories a bit more than like the like I saw a weird creature, kind of a cryptid story that's just like somebody saw something clearly, but
Yeah, your story,
yeah.
like the I Ghost Hunter one, are actual true encounters that people have had with ghosts.
Mhm.
Not every so there's 6 stories. We try to balance it out with cryptids, personal ghost encounters, and other strange things. So you can also have strange fiction. So yeah, this is a perfect example. This is Witch Hill, which is folklore from Alexandria, Kentucky. And we had the writer of this is Brandon McEachran, and the illustrator is Scott Booth for the one on the right. And then the Three Witches is illustrated by Michelle Littlejohn, who is an illustrator out of Cleveland, but was really happy to work on the project. And yay, Cleveland rocks, because I'm from Cleveland. Yeah. Um, but that one is folklore from the area, and it's old folklore because that story and the ghosts that are associated with that witch's tree is from the 1700s when the area was settled by people from New England. I mean, we've had First
Fresh off
Nation
the witch
people
burning
there.
era.
Yeah, we had First Nation people there for eons. I did not feel comfortable representing any of those stories without better input, especially from the Eastern Cherokee. But that particular story was people from Massachusetts who moved to Kentucky in the early days of Newport, essentially. Lauren, you did The Lady in Black, which is the story of Imogene Remus, who is the wife of notorious bootlegger George Remus, as seen on Boardwalk Empire and the
Ah.
inspiration in the for
Yes.
Gatsby and the Great Gatsby.
Mhm.
Like, but Lauren and Jen worked on a story that is from Imogene's point of view because George, spoilers, shoots her to death in a park.
Yep.
You want to talk
Eden
about it a little bit? Yeah.
I actually went to Eden Park to take a bunch of photos to get like the perspective of the hill right and stuff like that. So it was really fun for me looking up historical photographs of both him and Imogene and their daughters and all the cars that were common in the time period and the fashion. That's like I did a couple historical comics for the Votes for Women anthology before this. So getting back into like doing research about historical clothing is really fun for me. I'm a nerd. I'm sure you didn't know that already.
I mean, we're all nerds. It's kind of what got us here in the
Yeah.
first place.
Yeah,
Totally.
it's pretty dramatic. I was a little bit sad because Jen's story was a little bit longer than we were able to adapt for the comic just because it had to be a certain length to be in the
We only had 6 pages to work with.
Yeah. So we kind of had to compress her story and not have like there was an intro that we didn't use, but we're still using the ending of the short story she wrote, which kind of is an amalgam of a bunch of different people's experiences of seeing this ghost in Eden Park. So here I've got the gazebo. The place that people say they see her ghost is right next to the Spring House gazebo. Is that the right name? Is it Spring
Yes,
House?
it's the Spring House
Yeah.
gazebo.
Which was built in the early 1900s or the late 1800s. I cannot remember. But Eden Park has been a park in Cincinnati since the 1800s. It used to have a big reservoir. Right now, there's still a lake there, but it's a lot smaller than the previous reservoir. But basically, there was a car chase going down a really steep hill that is still there. And her taxi crashed and she tried to run and he chased her.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of drama because he had been in jail and then she kind of started an affair with an FBI agent who was investigating his bootlegging and there's a lot.
It's a very big story and
Yeah.
pretty well known in Cincinnati, but not so much outside, I think, the tri-state area. But yeah, it's she George and Imogene, over the course of their marriage, which was only 7 years, amassed over $40 million through bootlegging illegally during Prohibition. And George had been an attorney, and he found loopholes in the Volstead Act that he could exploit to basically make bonded liquor, which was kind of whiskey but stronger, and sell it for medicinal purposes because he also had been a pharmacist back in Chicago. So he had a pharmacy license. So he would essentially, with one hand, be distilling everything at these distilleries. And then as these pieces of or bottles of whiskey were being taken to the pharmacies to be sold as medicine, air quotes, he would have his own employees rob these trucks and then they would sell it on the black market. So he's making so much money. And he lived in a huge mansion with Imogene called the Marble Palace in Price Hill and would just have these lavish parties. Like my favorite one is just her birthday party, in 1923. She was in a scandalous swimsuit, which was just a one piece that hugged to the hips, and she had synchronized swimmers swim with her with a 15-piece orchestra as they were swimming through the pool in the Marble Palace for fun. And that was just a low-key party for them. It and so
I just
Him.
don't understand that level of wealth. Like,
Yeah, and Cincinnati was full of these mob ties,
hmm
bootlegging, that
Cleveland was too
Newport.
for a long time.
Yeah, and so he got out when they did that low it was actually a low-speed car chase because it was Cincinnati traffic going through Eden Park on the way to the courthouse so they could get divorced. She gets out of their taxi, or her taxi, she was sharing it with her daughter Ruth. He gets out of his chauffeured car and shot her once in the stomach with his handgun in front of everyone stuck in traffic going through Eden Park on their way to downtown Cincinnati because the Columbia Parkway hadn't been built yet. So you have all these
Wow.
witnesses, and he got away. He got acquitted for her murder by just claiming temporary insanity. And he went
The
in,
20s were wild, man.
yeah, he lived for another 30 years um, with a new wife in Newport.
Yeah, well,
So,
I was gonna say I would assume she left him after that.
oh yeah. But the ghost has been encountered over since 1927 when she was murdered. Um, it's basically a residual haunting, which is a haunting that just tends to replay on for anniversaries. So in early October, just about every single year, you'll have somebody who will run into a woman dressed all in black in 1920s garb. She's wearing the cloche hat and everything, and they'll come up to her and be like, "Hey, what you doing?" And it's early in the morning or really late at night at dusk, and she's just looking out over the lake there. And as soon as she's approached and talked to, she just disappears. And she's one of the most well-known ghosts in the city.
That's wild.
hmm So it was fun seeing how Lauren and Jen were adapting the story. Um, it like we had the kind of what are you looking there for? Yeah, the last page. I love the last page.
The
I love the
ghost.
watercolor.
Oh, that's
I kind of
awesome.
did an amalgam, like a jogger. Like a lot of the stories come from folks who jog in Eden Park. So
It makes sense. They're out at like real early morning or like real like late evening, and it's all foggy. And oh yeah,
hmm
I can definitely see how a lot of reports come from
Oh yeah.
joggers.
And it's within Eden Park is on the east side of Cincinnati, nestled in a large residential area. So you have people
So it's not
walking
like
through
it's
the
off in the cut somewhere hidden or
no,
anything. It's just right out in the open.
exactly. And there's I think part of the Flying Pig Marathon runs past and through Eden Park because
Huh.
I
no.
yeah athletics what what's that? I never leave my studio. One of my friends actually is a marathon runner, and when he was training, he would go around Eden Park, but he would specifically go at dusk and dawn, hoping that he could run into her and then
Well, see,
report
now
it
that's
back.
the problem because I've always heard when you're trying to find them, you're never gonna see anything. It's when you're not
Exactly,
trying to find something is when you're gonna see it.
exactly. So it's oh, I wish I think you 2 did a fantastic job on that piece, Lauren, and it's actually the story we're leading off with this book. I wish I had a physical copy, but they're not here yet, to be able to show everyone. But, yeah, I love it. You did such a
So
good job.
before we get into the end of the show routine, I wanna kinda try and have you guys kind of emphasize the importance of actually doing research when you're making a story for a book, because I think that's something that a lot of beginning indie creators kind of overlook with their first couple projects, as they just want to get their ideas out of their head and they don't always do a bunch of research on like the world building aspect of it or like what style clothes everybody should be wearing or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Lauren, do you wanna start?
Sure. I really love history comics generally, and there's a great illustrator named Chris Schweitzer who also lives in Kentucky who does a lot of history comics. So I'm going to kind of borrow from his advice that I actually asked him when I was working on history comics. Was that if you're going to be doing history comics, you are not going to learn everything at once. You're going to gradually build and build and build and build and build on your knowledge. And you're kind of going to get like a slightly fuller picture of how things were living in the past with every additional story that you do research for, because you're going to find some additional facet that you just didn't explore previously because you didn't even know it was there. Like, what did people do before electricity? I don't know. So you learn a lot about there's man, I'm just thinking about the 3 history comics that I've done that are kind of, 2 of them are in the 1800s and this one's in the 1920s. So I'm still relatively at the beginning of a history comics journey. It helps to really be interested in people, because something that I feel like it's easier to comprehend the older you get is that people are just people, and people have always been weird. They were weird in the 1800s. They all had their funny habits. They had whatever unique thing about themselves that all their neighbors were like, okay, whatever.
Right.
Little eccentricities.
Yeah, people have always been that way. So when looking up different costumes, like you'll say historical costume, historical dress, but like people actually lived and worked in these clothes. So something that was really fun when I was doing research for the 1800s was like, everyone's wearing these corsets. Are you wearing these corsets? How do you do all your work in these corsets? And it turns out like there's like a very, very big difference between like tight lacing for fashion and just wearing your undergarments, which is what a corset is. So there's lots of assumptions that you might have that will get dashed when you realize, oh, this was the practicality, this was the purpose, this was the normal thing at the time, and everyone did it because it was fine. It was just expected. And
There was like
that
actually
was the
logic
random.
behind why they were doing the things they were doing back then.
Yes. Like just the fashionable silhouette was this whatever shape, and you really need these specific undergarments to even make that work, which is why when you try and like, I'm going to wear an 1800s dress right now, it looks so wrong if you're just wearing your 2025 underwear underneath it. It's very, very funny. There's a lot of historical costume YouTubers who are excellent that I've learned a lot from. There's tons of nerds out
I
there.
keep telling everybody, man, YouTube University, you'll learn anything you need to know.
A lot of, yeah. Like with fashion, there's a lot of fashion archives, fashion plate archives as well, and they can
Mhm.
go into basically just all the different layers that were worn, why different colors were used at different times for different people, like, and it goes across history. Like if you're looking at Japanese or Korean or Chinese history as well, they had fashion change as time went on as well. It's a good way of marking when something happens, their status, and how wealthy they were. So
Mhm.
fashion is extremely important in that case with a visual media such as graphic novels. It's very helpful to know. But also like transportation. How did they get around? What's in their house? How are they going to the bathroom? All those
Yeah.
questions. So
Yeah.
the Library of Congress is a great resource as well.
Yes.
I
I
think
had to
that's
learn
something
about different
nobody
types
really
of
thinks about
flags.
very often, is that the Library of Congress even exists.
Yeah.
Because I feel like we learned about it once in high school and then nobody ever talks about it again.
Or you don't know everything that's in there. And
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
oh, this is a library that has literally existed for 250 years. They have a lot of stuff.
Including the Cabinet of Curiosities.
What?
Yeah. Yeah, both copies are in the Library of Congress.
Okay, that's just freaking cool.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
It's a very proud moment. I was literally throwing the copies at the librarian when she was at Small Press Expo. I'm like, "You want these? They're local interest for Cincinnati. Take them." So she's like, "Okay, okay, redhead, calm down." Um, at any rate, yeah, so when you're building your own worlds, you want to take into consideration just how your characters are moving within those worlds. So, fun aside, my next project is called Dinosaur Necromancer. So the question that I have to ask is this the Earth? No, it's not. We have humans and dinosaurs living in harmony on this alien planet. How do they get around? Well, they use herbivore dinosaurs. What type of dinosaurs? I had to look and see what kind of dinosaurs humans could physically, like, plausibly use to move anything without getting stomped on, and also like make sure they don't get eaten by accident.
See,
But
that's
then
the stuff for
also,
me, I wouldn't think of that if I was getting ready to start my first book. Like,
yeah,
I wouldn't think
it's
going that deep.
yeah, you're not going to like lasso up a T-Rex and ride it. In reality, your character could die because it could, one, get stomped on, and then if your ride gets hungry, you're the snack. But also,
And
what kind of
conveniently located right
topography?
on their backs. So
True, but you will escape those tiny little arms. But uh give them a yo-yo, see how they do. Uh, but those are just kind of things you want to think about. And like for Dinosaur Necromancer, the antagonists are cat aliens that come descending to their world in mecha, so alien mech suits. So how are these dinosaurs going to fight these cat aliens in mech suits? And that becomes an instant, uh, basically conflict. And not only for me to figure out how this can happen, but also visually, what kind of fights can I basically script out? Oh, how much does a period piece set story differ from a history comic? Can you take more liberties with one as opposed to the other, i.e., just sticking to the history of the event? Ooh, that's an excellent
that's why I
question.
put it on the screen because I'm like, that is such a good question. So, what is your guys' take on that?
I think like you're mentioning like an event. So if you're making a historical fiction, but it's based around something that is real, I would say your biggest liberties could be taken with whatever character you are making who is there. Because people are people and they're going to think whatever they think. And they've always thought lots of different things. So if you can look up um, the people who were there at a given event and see some different perspectives from that time. And then when you're making your character, figure out like what is their profession, what is their relation to this event, if any. Are they just walking by, or were they working in the place that just caught fire? Who knows? I think the biggest liberties you could take would be with whatever character you are using to introduce people to this historical event. If you're doing something around a specific historical event. What
And
do you
how
think, Kat?
plausible your character can act within that historical event. So that's something to consider because you're trying to basically write, if it's historical fiction, something that could plausibly happen within the construct of the culture of the time. And then you're also altering it slightly to make it more interesting for 21st century readers. So you want to take little cultural touchstones that people, kind of a cultural shorthand essentially, and be able to inject that into your story so people can kind of follow along, but your characters are also doing something a little bit offbeat that we as readers in the 21st century identify with. I hope I'm making sense. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's the thing. Yeah, that's basically it. You want those little touchstones. Versus if you're doing a historical piece like we're doing without the ghost story, but the shot for shot of Imogene Remus, we're going to be referencing actual historical data from photographs to the newspaper articles, and then also the eyewitness accounts of the time, and also like the trial, if we were to ever make an actual entire graphic novel about the ludicrous trial that George Remus went through. His daughter, who was a child star of early Hollywood, was there every day. She never, she may have testified once, but she just sat there and looked gorgeous in like this huge mink coat every single day. And that just brought more media in. So you have to think about how, like, all the media and all the information, what kind of bias they're also using when showing you this information. And you can use that to write the story as well.
Yeah. It's really interesting to see, like, in that time period, if you can look up old newspaper stuff, you can see, like, obituaries of this regular person who led a regular life and everyone misses them. Sad, sad, sad. And then also stories about what was considered a scandal. And you can
Yeah.
kind of find a range of
Yeah, that's a
what
good point
makes
because
sense.
something that might have been like, a big news story back then wouldn't even make the news nowadays.
Yeah. And you also want to look for for either historical fiction or retelling historical stories, nonfiction, essentially. Um, there's also a lot in pop magazines at the time that gives you a lot of information about the culture. So I'm going to reference a 1920s, um, oh, not New Yorker, but it's a Norman Rockwell illustration that he did. It's two people working with a Ouija board or a spirit board at the time. And it's a young man and a young woman. And the young woman is staring up into the sky, trying to connect with the spirit world. But the young man is clearly looking down her shirt. And it's also their legs are touching together. And at the time, you did these events in parlors, usually supervised, but this is one of the few times that a young couple who were in love were able to actually, touch, even if it was just the knees. And the fact that this was on the cover of the Saturday Evening Post is amazing. And it gives us a good key into how people dated at that time, essentially. And if you could bring in those kind of culture cues into your stories, it makes it so much richer and more believable.
Yep. You got to take in a lot of information.
Oh, there's so much.
Yeah.
See, this stuff is more in depth than superheroes. Everybody, we keep trying to tell you.
Yeah. And it's adaptable to superhero stories as well, though.
Oh yeah,
It
100%.
can go to anything, but it just,
Because
people are weird.
more science fiction.
Mhm,
So learn about the science
mhm.
that was fictionalized.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. One of my hobbies is reading the odds, not odd stories, but it was the basically town gossip from Cincinnati back in like the 1910s and 1920s, the odd things that people reported about.
Like
It's
in
just,
columns in the
they're
newspaper.
just like in little columns, like little society pages, essentially. Like I
Oh,
discovered in
funny.
1908 in Hyde Park in Cincinnati, there was a tornado and it killed a mule and its rider on Observatory Avenue. A tree fell on them.
unfortunate.
And it's just fun little things like that. That's
I was gonna say the horrible luck of that of being
know,
that
right?
guy on a mule. Like
Yep.
Yep.
wrong day, wrong place, man.
Yes.
Shoot.
Wrong tree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But before we get out of here, I know it's getting at least late on our end. I know for you, Kat, it's still relatively early.
It's a wonderful evening. It is getting dark though. So I'm outside for Seattle for those who care.
Yeah, gotcha. But where can everybody find you guys at online? Where can they check out Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities and Corpse Flower Press?
Oh. You want to go first, Jen? Or Lauren? You're not Jen. I talked to Jen yesterday.
Jen was yesterday.
Jen was yesterday.
I am at Winged Elf Girl on lots of different social media. The ones I use the most lately are Instagram and Blue Sky. And I don't have a website.
But she's got a link tree, so hit that QR
Yeah.
code on the screen right there, and you will find everything that Lauren's got going on.
Eventually, we'll build you a website.
Cat's got a bunch.
I got so many. So buckle in, everyone. This is where you can find me. You can find all of my work at corpseflowerpress.com. We have a store. It's a digital bookstore where you can buy all the books. The orders come to me and I fulfill them to you. You can find me at Red Cat Comics. That's my personal stuff. So the stories I was talking about earlier, Dinosaur Necromancer, you'll see it through there. But you can also find me at Corpse Flower Press on social media as well. It's this wonderful skull that is coming out of a flower bud. That is me. So for the Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities, this wonderful book series, you can find at cincycuriosities.com. That's CINCY curiosities.com. I just want to, some people think it's an I, the second I, but that's why. Surprise. And we will be having a launch party on February 28th at Indy, Northern Kentucky, which is the Ink Store. It is a small press bookstore. From 7 to 9 p.m., we are going to be with them, and we also partnered with the Cincy and Northern Kentucky Comics Club, and we're doing live comic book readings from the new book. We are going to be doing book signings, and also we'll have all this original art that Lauren and I have been holding up awkwardly for all of you to look at. That will be on display, so you can actually look at it and go, yeah, can't draw, or Lauren is fantastic. Hire her for everything. That's your opportunity. And we'll also be at the Frogman Festival in Loveland, Ohio, at the Oasis Conference Center on March 1st and 2nd, selling the brand new copy of the Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities, Haunts and Horrors.
That is a mouthful, but you got it all out.
Bro.
Why did I name it that? Why did I name it that?
Hindsight, right?
Yes.
But anyway, everybody, thank you for checking out the show today. Thank you two for coming on to the show. If you want to hang out for another minute or two after we go off, we'll stay on camera for a minute. Everybody, please check out both their web pages. Well, Lauren's Linktree, since she doesn't have a website yet. Go check out Corpse Flower Press, Red Cat Comics, Winged Elf Girl, Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities. We will be back here in a week or two on the same night, on the same time. And as always, everybody, please be safe, be kind, take it easy, and we will see you on the next episode. Peace.
Huzzah!